Because nutrition is a study of food, health, and disease, it's actually important that we begin our journey on what food is. And when we look at food, it contains nutrients. And these nutrients are going to have a few functions. They can do a few things, rather. One is that nutrients can provide energy, especially carbohydrates. Another thing that nutrients can do is that they can provide the building blocks for cells. And another thing that nutrients can do is help or facilitate, we're just going to try to spell that right. The growth and maintenance of the body. And so those are going to be sort of examples of what things nutrients can do. And I can kind of give you some examples. So for example, for the provide energy, glucose is an example, providing building blocks. That could be fat or it could be proteins. And the facilitating the growth or the maintenance of the body, that could actually be all of them. That could be vitamins and minerals as well. So, to end the foreshadowing here, let's actually talk about those 6 classes of nutrients, right? And the very first class of nutrients I want to talk about are going to be carbohydrates. And carbohydrates can be used by the body to obtain energy, and it gets about 4 calories per gram, right? So it's about 4 kilocalories. That's how much a carbohydrate is worth in energy. An example of a carbohydrate would be like bread, pasta, potatoes. Those would be examples of carbohydrates. Another class of nutrients would be proteins. And proteins can be used by the body to obtain energy, and it's about 4 kilocalories or 4 calories per gram. And an example of a protein, proteins are actually found everywhere. They're found in vegetables, but mostly you will probably be more familiar with them thinking about meats or fish or even vegetables like soy, for example, is a very good source of protein. And proteins are going to be used by the body to make like hair, skin, and nails, which we need. The other class of nutrients will be fat. And fat represents sort of a long-term energy storage and source, right? And this not so much requires, but it is worth a whopping 9 kilocalories or 9 calories per gram. So fat is actually worth twice its weight in carbohydrate gold, so to speak. And again, fat is going to surround all of our cells. So we have trillions of cells, and each of those cells are surrounded by a layer of fat. The other class of nutrients I want to talk about will be vitamins. And vitamins are interesting because vitamins are going to be required for the body to perform physiological processes. And then there are water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins. So, for example, the fat-soluble vitamins would be like A, D, and K, or sorry, A, D, E, and K. So we'll just say that's the fat. Actually, I won't even put that there. I'm just going to actually erase that and just tell you that the fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, and the water-soluble vitamins are B and C. Vitamins do not give any type of usable energy, right? So there is no kilocalories or calories per gram for vitamins. The next one will be minerals. And minerals are inorganic substances that don't contain carbon, and they perform lots of functions in the body, right? So my favorite mineral to talk about is sodium and potassium. So sodium and potassium are minerals that our body actually uses to generate electrical potentials in neurons, which is actually really, really cool. And again, just like vitamins, minerals contain no usable energy for the body. The last nutrient will be water, and many of us do not drink enough water, and it acts as a solvent and lubricant in the body, and it has numerous functions in the body. In fact, just drinking a cup of water actually lowers your blood pressure. It's actually quite crazy, and the recommended intake is about 9 to 11 cups. And again, water does not have any usable energy there. So I want to circle back and talk about another component of food, which is going to be called phytonutrients. And you may or may not have heard about phytonutrients or phytochemicals. And these are going to be chemicals that are going to be found in plants. And they are in a very exciting part of nutrition research because many of them have been found to be antioxidants. And cooler, many of them have been shown or have evidence to improve human health. So there is some evidence to improve human health. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of phytochemicals. I am not going to ask you to memorize any of these, just so that you can be aware that there are some, and you can maybe look them up if you are interested, right? So one example of a phytochemical, which you have probably heard of, is lycopene, right? So I don't know if you have actually heard of lycopene. And lycopene is found in tomatoes, and there is some evidence that lycopene can actually help in cardiovascular health. Another phytochemical that you may or may or not have heard of is resveratrol. And resveratrol has been shown, at least in mice, to actually extend lifespan. Though unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, those studies have not been repeated in humans. And you would find resveratrol in wine, for example. And I forgot to put the tomatoes here for the lycopene. And I'll give you one more phytochemical, just for those maybe if you wanted to kind of look them up, will be EGCG. And I'm going to write it just like that because you don't want me to write out the whole name. And this is actually found in green tea. And then there is some evidence that it has an effect on blood pressure and cardiovascular health. So again, I'm not going to ask you about any of these phytochemicals. I just want you to know that these phytochemicals are found in food, and they do have some evidence of contributing to health. However, there is concern that these phytochemicals are being over-marketed and in some cases overused because there isn't the evidence in humans of its efficacy. So I want to talk about a few more things. And one is really the difference between sedentary and active. So let's start with the easy one first, right? Or the most intuitive, active. So this is someone who may exercise, they may do lots of activities outside, and so they actually are getting lots of physical activity, right? So they're getting lots of exercise and physical activity. Right, so that's a person who is active. A person who is sedentary is not getting any activity or physical activity. So they are going to have limited to no physical activity. And it turns out that having a sedentary lifestyle is actually a risk factor for chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer, and even hypertension. And if you don't know what hypertension is, that's just another word for high blood pressure. So just something that you keep these two words in mind, because we will actually be going back to sedentary a lot when we talk about sedentary people, sedentary lifestyles, because it is a risk factor for disease. The final thing I wanted to talk to you about before I end this video is just the difference between hunger, appetite, and satiety, right? And so when we're talking about hunger, hunger is really going to be that internal drive, right? So hunger is going to be that internal drive. Right, and so this is so when you have hunger, it is because your stomach and is empty, your body needs calories, and that you are famished. Appetite is actually a psychological influence or an external influence. This is an external drive to eat. And an example of this would be perhaps, let's say, we had a really wonderful meal at Red Lobster, and I offer, and you're very, very stuffed, you can't eat anymore, and I offer you your favorite dessert. And so you take a few bites, even though you're absolutely stuffed. So that would be an example of an appetite. That would be an external drive to eat. So even in the absence of hunger, even really in the reverse of hunger, even if you're full, you can still have an appetite for that. In fact, I'm sure you've heard of the adage of having an appetite for dessert. The last thing I wanted to talk about would be your satiety. And satiety is just simply feeling satisfied with your meal or feeling full. So we'll just put feeling full or satisfied, whatever word after eating. After eating, and just apologize for my handwriting there. And this will actually be regulated by the feeding center and the satiety center in the brain, right? And so we don't really need to know where those regions are in the brain, just know that they are in the brain. So I'm hoping that this was helpful. If it is, please let me know. If it isn't and you prefer longer videos, please let me know that as well. I am kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what is the best way to kind of get this information across. But what I will tell you outside of all of this is to make sure that you read your book, read the notes and the PowerPoints. And if you have any questions, let me know. And I am dying to know your comments on whether you found this helpful or not. And if you didn't, that's okay too. I really want to know that. So, okay, thank you very much.